We begin this segment in Mozambique as a top court there has ruled that a government-guaranteed $850 million Eurobond issued by state-run tuna fishing company Emerton in 2013 was illegal. Mozambique has been battling to restructure its finances after the emergence in 2016 of about $1.4 billion of undisclosed borrowing that prompted the International Monetary Fund and foreign donors to cut financial support, triggering a currency crisis and a sovereign debt default. The Constitutional Council declares the nullity of the act inherent to the loan contracted by Emerton and the respective sovereign guarantee granted by the government in 2013 with all legal consequences. It says that no expenditure can be assumed, ordered or carried out without being duly registered in the budget of the approved state, which was not the case. The $850 million Eurobond was dubbed the Tuna Bond, as it was supposed to finance a tuna fishing fleet and had been presented to investors as funding for fishing infrastructure. And the Statistics Office of South Africa on Tuesday reported that the economy slumped a whopping 3.2% in the first quarter of 2019. The International Monetary Fund says South Africa's subdued economic growth could be reignited if the implementation of structural reforms, including at the troubled state power utility Eskom, is accelerated. Well, let's bring in an economic analyst there in South Africa, Trinity Nkube, to put all of these together for us. Good afternoon, Mr. Nkube. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Obi. Thank you for having me again.
So, analysts are of the opinion that the GDP number released yesterday will come as a shock to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Was that the case? Were you, as a South African, shocked by that?
Yes, I think, well, we were expecting not so great numbers. The biggest shock, I think, is because this is the first time in the past 10 years, since 2009, that we had such a big slump. Given that there was some moderate economic growth, over the past 2 quarters. So this is a shock because now, there's no room for error now, because if this continues into the next quarter, we're technically in a recession. So yeah, that was quite shocking that a lot of sectors just, contracted within the last quarter.
Now, one of the main issues attributed to that unimpressive GDP numbers there is the the crisis at state power utility firm Eskom. The IMF is advocating some structural reforms that would include that troubled power utility. Now we've had the CEOs of Eskom and South Africa Airways CEO resign. Now, is this part of the reforms the IMF may possibly be talking about?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting because now some of these SOEs have been in trouble for quite a lot of years. And from the last budget speech, what we found out, the finance minister reiterated the need to support these state-owned enterprises. And it seemed as though that there's some stress when it comes to the finances. There just isn't enough funds to sustain these SOEs. So there's this view that all these SOEs need to go lean and actually restructure them. Funding them, continually funding them, is a downside risk that the IMF is looking at. So now we need to make tough decisions where there's no time for rhetoric. Basically, reform needs to be done now. We don't have even more than 3 months to get it right. Otherwise, we'll be in recession, and all of a sudden, we start to chase away investment and so forth. So yes, there's some challenges there. I mean, all the CEOs start to leave the door because they found out now that they basically will not be getting the significant budgets they were hoping for, or some of these, in terms of being bailed out in a way. Those kind of funds are not going to come out in the next quarter or so. So that just means that a lot of the CEOs were really stressed about, okay, well, how are we going to work? So there's a lot of restructuring. We wait to see what President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to do, because now the cabinet is there. There was a delay in the announcement in the cabinet, but they need to act now. Time for rhetoric has just gone. Yes.
Now, there's a kind of a challenge there. Now, some investors are saying that the CEO's resignations could slow, the implementation of turnaround plans seen as critical to shoring up confidence in that economy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I find the need that some of these entities need to be privatized. Now, this is a very contentious issue, but some of these entities will need to be privatized, not wholly privatized. The government still has, a role to play in sustaining and making sure that we have electricity, in ensuring that we have infrastructure, travel, and so forth. But the electricity issue is the biggest issue, and this is where we need a long-term plan. Because now we've been talking about renewable energy, we've been talking about nuclear energy, all of those things, we can't really afford them in the interim. So, but either way, though, we need a longer term plan. In the meantime, there's been suggestions that you need to break apart ESCOM and restructure it, looking at strengthening the strategic and operational aspect of ESCOM. There's a lot of wastage going on, which now poses another risk of having to, they just increased tariffs by 18.8%, which is also affecting investors and consumers. So there's definitely a need to start doing something now. There will be some short-term pain, but in the long run, we need to stabilize ESCOM, restructure it, have a plan. At this point, the public also just wants to see what is the way forward. There's policy uncertainty in terms of, okay, how are we actually going to do something about ESCOM? Because nothing is really being said and done. Okay. There's just a lot of rhetoric and not implementation.
All right, Mr. Nkube, just before I let you go, a quick one. Ramaphosa's party announced yesterday that they are expanding the mandate of the Reserve Bank beyond price stability to include growth and employment. Well, that's the trend most central bankers are taking now anyway. But then, can the Reserve Bank really achieve much without good fiscal policies?
That's a great question, because now what you see is that the governor of the South African Reserve Bank, they are very doubtful. They want the mandate to be focused on the monetary policy aspect. On the other side, we have so many structural issues around the economy that needs to be, handled in a different way, because structural reforms then lie outside of the scope of the monetary policy. In my view as an economist, there's a need for policy coordination between the monetary and fiscal policy. However, fiscal policy, again, from the National Treasury and some of the fiscal departments need to handle the structural issues. I don't think monetary policy is going to fix all these structural issues.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Trinity Nkube. Thank you for your time. Meanwhile, the South African Central Bank has said it will not bail out the country's troubled state-owned companies, including power utility Eskom Holdings, because it will feel inflation. The governor says the central bank won't consider stepping in because it will require printing cash. It's also prohibited by law to undertake unsecured lending. And Angola has unveiled plans to boost refining and auction oil blocks as it seeks to attract investors back to its struggling energy industry. According to President João Lourenço, the country will intensify the replacement of reserves in order to smoothen the deep decline of oil production, ensure self-sufficiency in refined products by building new refineries and increase production capacity at existing plants. The strategy includes constructing a new refinery in the northern city of Soyo, which will be the third proposed plant following plans for a 200,000 barrels a day refinery in Lobito and a smaller facility in Cabinda. And that's a wrap on the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwagu.